let's go to Albert Breer live from Nantucket. Yes, that is a thing. Look at that tan on this guy. Oh, my gosh. What are you doing this summer? Just on a lobster boat? What's going on?
No lobster boat for me. But, yeah, this is a couple of weeks I shut it down. And, one of my few strengths, J-Mac, is my ability to tan. So everybody can see that on the screen now.
Yes. Up close and personal. All right, before we get to NFL, I know you're a huge college football guy. And Deion Sanders came out this week and essentially said, we need a salary cap in college football. So, Breer, we went from like, players can't get paid 5 years ago to NIL to salary. Like, it's exploding at a pace that I don't think anybody could have foreseen. Your Buckeyes are always big spenders. But when you hear salary cap in college football, it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense, does it?
I mean, I think I understand what Deion's saying, and I think what Deion's saying is a small version of a bigger topic that college coaches have been discussing for years now, which is we need guardrails. We need some sort of system that'll put rules in place that everybody has to play by, that maybe isn't apples to apples from program to program based on what program you're at, but gives everybody a fighting chance. And, I think if you're at a place like Colorado, which is not, a blue blood at the level of Alabama or an Ohio State or a Texas, then it really does behoove you to have those sorts of guardrails in place and have some limits on how much you can spend. And so what'll be interesting about this, to me at least, is two things. The first thing I think would be, what this looks like with the NIL piece, because even though there is that the revenue share that goes up to 20 million, you do have like the other piece of it, which is NIL. And are schools going to be able to spend above the 20 million in NIL? How do you classify NIL versus money that's coming from the school? I think all of that needs clarification. And then I think the other one that's really obvious is whether or not they unionize.
Yeah.
And forever and ever and ever, the NCAA has pushed back against any sort of thought that these guys would be classified as employees. But if you're going to put a salary cap in place, it would pretty much necessitate a collective bargaining agreement, which would necessitate unionization and making these guys employees.
So when you listen to Deion, it almost sounds like he's maybe losing out on recruits to, I don't know, the Texas Techs of the world. Here is audio of Deion talking about a salary cap need, Albert.
I wish it was a cap. Like the top of the line player makes this. And if you're not that type of guy, you're not going to make that. That's what the NFL does. So the problem is you got a guy that's not that darn good, but he could go to another school and they give him $500,000, and you can't compete with that. That don't make sense. And all you have to do is look at the playoffs and see what those teams spent, and you understand darn near why they're in the playoffs. It's kind of hard to compete with somebody who's giving $25-30 million to a darn freshman class.
Right.
It's crazy. The team that pays the most is going to be there in the end.
Live Golf Dallas just wrapped up with a bang. Local heroes Bryson DeChambeau and his Crushers GC team celebrated victory on Bryson's home turf in front of a record crowd of over 50,000 fans for the weekend. So next, Live Golf returns to one of the world's most revered courses at Spain's Real Club Valderrama from the 11th to the 13th of July. So it's another chance to see 54 of the world's best golfers competing for individual and team glory. So last year, DeChambeau and his Crushers Golf Club suffered a heartbreaking playoff defeat to Sergio Garcia's Fireballs. So Bryson will be looking to claim his first ever win at Valderrama. But he'll have to contend with the passionate Spanish crowd cheering on their countrymen. So there's another factor at play. John Rahm, another Spanish superstar, is chasing his own first ever win at Valderrama. Live Golf Andalusia promises to be a thrilling competition beneath the Spanish sun. So if you want to catch all the drama in Valderrama, you can follow every shot live on Fox Sports.
So again, just wrapping up on college football, do you think we will see one here in the next 5 years, or is there just too much layer? Like you mentioned the word union. That's insane for college football. Come on.
Yeah, and I don't know how you solve it. And, once the genie got out of the bottle, I don't think there was any putting it back in. But I also don't know how you put enough rules in place to make it fair for everybody unless you turn the guys into employees. And then if you're going to put a cap on what employees can make, well, that needs to be negotiated with the employees, which would require, the employees being in a union. So I like, there's no easy answers here, J-Mac. I mean, it just sort of is what it is. And, I think there was an opportunity over the last 20 years for the NCAA, for the conferences to get a hold of this early and get in early and try to fix this early and create some sort of order and rules and guardrails and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, there wasn't the leadership at the NCAA level with guys like Mark Emmert to do that. Those guys were more concerned with just collecting every check until the money train stopped rolling, and so now everybody else is left to pick up the pieces. And I think it's, again, it's sort of unpredictable which way that's all going to go.
All right, let's pivot to the NFL. The new quarterback show on Netflix debuted, and it seems like Kirk Cousins is, I don't want to say a sympathetic figure, but I mean, you're laughing. I think a lot of people are like, who cares about this guy? He's made a lot of money. I keep going back to this. When it first happened that they traded up for Penix 6 weeks after signing Cousins to $100 million guaranteed, it felt like, whoa, that's kind of dirty. Kirk Cousins, I feel like he was misled by Atlanta. Like, if they had told him, we're drafting Penix, he probably would not have signed there, right?
Yeah, and I think like the on the quarterback show, he laid it out like as clearly as he's laid it out, or I think anybody's laid it out, which is more or less that the Vikings wanted him to go year to year. And I think a lot of us knew this at the time. And there was some reporting out there on this, that he was looking for a multi-year commitment from a team that beyond just the money, beyond just the guarantees, a statement like, this guy's going to be our quarterback for the foreseeable future. And that's reflected in the contract that we negotiated with him. And again, like, the Vikings were going through this process of resetting their roster, of getting some of the older players out of there, getting younger at key spots. You saw at the edge rusher position, for example, was a really good example of that, like where they move out Danielle Hunter and they bring in Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard and they draft Alice Turner. And so like the idea there was, well, yeah, Kirk, we're willing to bring you back. We're willing to pay you market value. But that does not mean we're not going to draft a quarterback. We're picking higher than we plan to pick for some time. And, if the quarterback is there that we like, we're going to take him. And that means we can't guarantee that you're going to be the quarterback in 2025 and going forward. We'll give you the job in 24, but that's really it. And the Falcons contract reflected that they were going to do more than that they were going to give him at least a couple of years of runway, and that it was going to be his show. And so, I think, looking at that from an apples to apples perspective, Kirk looked at it and said, okay, on one end, I'm going to get at least 2 years. And if I play well more than that on the other end, this team's probably going to take a quarterback in the first round, and I may be out after a year and looking for a new home again in 2025. So, of course, he took the first option, not knowing the two teams will wind up in very similar situations at the end. And I think the other thing you notice just listening to him talk, and this is pretty obvious, is like he felt like the Vikings were very honest with him. And because of that, the Vikings lost the quarterback, right? Whereas if you go back and you look at it, like he felt like the Falcons were wound up being a little bit dishonest, might be strong, but maybe misled him a little bit in the way they were going to handle the position.
Yeah. Let's go on to another story that just popped up. And, Jared Goff, a super nice guy, doesn't really rattle cages or say stuff. He kind of called the Rams, I don't know if it was McVay or the Rams organization, immature for the way they handled his departure a couple years ago. I'm looking back, with Jared Goff as a starter, he and McVay were doing awesome. They made the playoffs in 3 or 4 years. Like, it was a good run. Yep. And they got to a Super Bowl. And then to kind of not give him more than a 1 minute heads up that we're trading you. I don't know. Did he deserve that? What's your read on how that kind of shook out?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you listen to a lot of the stuff that Sean himself has said in the time since, he has a lot of regret from that. Yeah. And, he did go back and clear some of that stuff up. And they have been able to reestablish a relationship. I don't think it is what it was before, and probably never will be. But, I mean, it was to the point where, a year after the trade, one of the first texts that Sean got was from Jared congratulating him on winning the Super Bowl. So, I think there was a lot of regret in the Rams organization on the way things were handled down the stretch in 2020 and into early 2021 with Jared Goff, and they wish they would have handled it better than they did. I also don't think that they anticipated that the opportunity to replace Jared Goff was going to come along as quickly as it did. If you remember, that happened. That trade was agreed to. Now, it couldn't be consummated till March, but that trade was agreed to at the end of January. And so it was, I mean, I believe less than 2 weeks after the Rams season ended. So everything kind of moved fast. And I do think the Rams have some regret over the way that they handled that. And as much as they, I think, have worked out their differences, I think you can see, in the way that Jared's talking in the documentary, that he still feels a little stung by what went on.
Yeah, clearly. Anytime you get bounced that way, it's brutal. Now, I mean, he's done well in Detroit. I don't know if they backslide. Are you on board with the Lions probably backsliding a little bit this year?
Yeah, there's a lot that they have to replace.
Yeah.
I think Frank Ragnow is a really big loss. Like I know the amount they put on him to help run the show on offense and really help their young linemen. And from a leadership perspective, from a play perspective, he's really good. Now, they have some answers at the position. Graham Glasgow, they draft Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. But to think that they won't take a little bit of a step back in what's been a massive strength for them along that offensive line, I think you'd be fooling yourself at least a little bit not to think that there's going to be at least some effects to losing Ragnow up front. And then the other obvious part is the coordinators, right? So can Kelvin Shepherd be what Aaron Glenn was? Can John Morton be what Ben Johnson was? Those are high bars to clear for those coaches. On the flip side, though, I think everybody needs to remember what the Lions were at the end of the year. That was an incredibly banged-up team. They were playing at an exceptionally high level when they were healthy, and they were able to withstand losses of guys like Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil on the defensive side of the ball. They were down to, I think, only 3 or 4 full-time starters, like the guys they had planned to be their starters out there on that side. So I think if you look at that and you figure they're not going to have as bad injury luck, and they've still got so many young players that are ascending, your guys like Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs and Brian Branch, Aiden Hutchinson himself coming back off the injury, that those guys are still on the way up. They still should be really good, even if they do take a step back.
I got to ask you about the Kansas City Chiefs. I think when you do TV hits, you automatically have to talk Chiefs at some point. But Brett Veach made a curious comment about Travis Kelce, and I think he was just being honest, but it kind of sounded like maybe he can see the end for Travis Kelce, and you could see him wear down, but he was just being honest. I don't think it was a dig, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on Veach's comments on Kelce.
Well, I mean, he's turning 36.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think I think if you're being honest about it, he's already that position, by the way, it's amazing he's made it as long as he has. More tight ends wear the tag of injury prone than I think at any other position. And the reason why is because of how difficult that position is on your body. So the fact that he's made it this far is really, really remarkable. But yeah, they do have to plan for what's next here. They did give Noah Gray a contract extension, who's been his backup, who they drafted out of Duke a couple of years ago. Yeah. And the offense is going to look a little bit different. I mean, the weird thing is, J-Mac, I look at it I think Travis Kelce could take a step back and they still could be significantly better on offense than they were a year ago.
How?
And it's for a few reasons. I think their tackle situation will be better. I don't know what combination of Jalen Moore, Jawan Taylor, and Josh Simmons will be out there tackle, but it should be better than what they had at the end of the year last year. And then Matt Nagy had this vision for the offense last summer that never came to life, and it was Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy on the outside with Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice running through the space vacated underneath. Hollywood Brown got hurt at the start of the year. He wasn't available till December. Rashee Rice went down for the year about a month in. So you never got to see all of that all together. Well, now you are going to get the chance to see it all together. And they think Rashee Rice has a chance to be one of the 10 best receivers in football.
What?
And Xavier Worthy's coming back in his second year. And Pacheco's healthy. So if you're better at tackle and you had this vision that you had drawn out last year that comes to life this year, I think they actually have a chance to be better on offense than they were a year ago, with the X factor, of course, being Kelce's age. The same way I think the defense is going to be really good, with the X factor being Chris Jones's age on that side of the ball.
Now, listen, I'm glad you saved that hot take for that moment, because I'm shocked right now. I haven't heard anybody say that. Everybody seems to think regression is coming. You know, the aging.
You're all prisoners to the last thing you saw.
Not me, but other people probably. So that's interesting. A world where the Chiefs' offense is better with everybody healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And the offensive line, maybe. Well, you're an Ohio State guy, right? You know the guy that they drafted, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Simmons is like, that's a devastating injury for like a big man. Like that's worse than a torn ACL. What he went through, the torn patellar tendon. And I don't think it was perfect at first, but since the Chiefs have had him, he's checked all the boxes, and physically he's a freak. So the beauty of it for the Chiefs is they don't need him to start day one. If he wins the job, great. But they brought in Jalen Moore to play that position from the Niners, who had been a fill-in for Trent Williams. They have Juwan Taylor there, who has been up and down, but still has ability. So, like, they can kind of bring Josh Simmons along at his own pace. And, you know, he's got the ability to be a top-shelf tackle. Somebody there compared him to Trent Williams. Maybe that's a little bit over the top, but he does have a lot of ability.
All right, we'll wrap up with this. Is there any update on T.J. Watt? There's reports out there that, like, the fan base is starting to get divided over what to do with their beloved T.J. Watt. There's a report about family member of someone in the organization venting, we can't pay him. What are you hearing out there?
I think there's too much mutual interest in getting something done for them not to get something done. The reason the Steelers went and got Aaron Rodgers is because with the core that they've built, the core that they've been highly competitive with, but not at the top level with over the last 4 or 5 years, there may be a 1 or 2 year window left. And that's TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick when he was still there before he got traded for Jalen Ramsey, which made them 2 years older. Cam Hayward's at the end. You know, with this group of players, it's about 2025. And I think that's part of what appealed about the situation to Aaron Rodgers, is that he looks at it and says, everybody else is on my timetable here. These are my peers. We're going to go chase a championship together. So if that's where the Steelers are, and TJ Watt is at a point in his career where he has to go chase like he knows the clock's ticking a little bit. He has leverage over the Steelers in that they need him to be part of that vision, but it also behooves him to be part of that team, you know? And so I just think there's too much mutual interest for them not to get something done. I do think the contracts for Myles Garrett and Danielle Hunter and Max Crosby done this offseason do complicate things a little bit, but at the end of the day, you know, the way I see it, at least, like the two parties involved here have too much mutual interest not to find a way to get something done. I don't know if it'll be at the beginning of camp or right before week one, but I would think that they'll find some sort of way to work this out.
All right, Albert Breer, thanks a lot for taking time out of your vacation and your family to talk football. Oh, my gosh, what a good guy. All right, Albert, enjoy.